Oh, welcome back. In this episode, I want to finish fine sanding all of the areas of the cab so that I can get it in primer and then it'll be ready for paint. Where I've got filler areas and sand scratch from the filler, I also sanded a lot of this with 180 just because it's all fairly well hidden. You're not really going to notice much sand scratch, but I'll go back over it all with 400. Not so much the areas that I'm planning on priming, because the primer I'll go back and sand with 400 too. And then definitely along here on the bottom, I want to scuff that up, but I want to leave any sand scratch along here. So I'll use a 400 on all the areas that I'm planning on painting on the cab. And then for the upper areas where you see a lot of reflection, I want to step back to a 600 grit so that I can just really knock it down smooth and don't have any risk at all of those sand scratches actually showing up on some of the upper areas. I like to use wet. I just feel like it cleans itself better. It keeps the sandpaper from gumming up as much. So I'm going to sand the back of the cab too. The whole roof is pretty much sanded already, but I need to get the back of this cab. Finally, with everything wet sanded and wiped down with a good wax and grease remover, it's time for primer. The gray primer that I'm starting out with is an epoxy primer. That'll give me a good chemical bond to all the bare metal areas as well as to the filler. And then I'll use a black primer surfacer, which is a high build primer and sands excellent to fill all the sand scratches and little holes that might appear in any of the filler area, so that I won't have to use quite as much of the black base coat. Since I used a black primer as a filler, I can't use a regular guide coat because it's black. So I have a gray primer that I'll use as a guide coat. Hopefully it shows up enough. Oh yeah. I just sanded these two areas so they are finished and ready for paint. I'm going to put on the hinges and then I will adjust everything for the last time. I'll get both doors on, I'll get them all adjusted, get them set exactly, then I'm going to tighten up these bolts, take the doors back off, prepare the hinge for paint, and then they will stay on. So that when the doors are ready, I just slide them into place and I can paint the doors. So this is a great step to be able to do the final adjustment on these two doors and hope for the best. I installed both strikers too so that it will latch the doors. It's funny, these are not adjustable. I mean, they are fixed. Bottom is out, top is in. So I got to do a little bit of adjusting, but the gap is right, so it's just a matter of the twist on the door. Holes are ovaled. It's settled in the bottom of that oval, so I have to lift the door up to get it to adjust. I have to play with both doors. This one's just a little bit high. This one's just a little bit in, a little bit out, a little bit in. I am really excited. These gaps are absolutely perfect. So I can take these doors off now, leave the hinges in place, and these doors will go back on exactly where they are now. So all the adjustment was just in the hinges. We'll get these doors off, get them all sanded down, get that high gloss off, and then these doors are ready to paint too. Fortunately, there is not a ding in them that I can see, so I have no dents to fix. There was a little bit of a wave right here on the top where they strapped it down on a pallet, but I was able to just tap that around and not do any damage to the paint or leave any dents in the metals. Looking really close to the high gloss on these doors, getting down on just the right angle, I can see there's a low spot right above the handle, right at the glass. So I'll just hit this with some spot filler and sand it down and prime it, and then we're ready. Once I finished all of the filler on the dents and got it all perfectly smooth with 80 grit sandpaper, I then went to 180 and sanded the whole area again to smooth out as much as I could of that really deep scratch. Then, since there were some bare metal areas, once I was finished with that, I painted the whole surface with an epoxy primer, and then I topped that epoxy primer with this black primer surfacer. The primer surfacer that I used can be used on bare metal, but you get much better bond, especially on a roof like this. It gets a lot of weather. I just wanted a good guaranteed bond with the epoxy. So now I'm going to wet sand all of that primer surfacer with a 500 grit sandpaper, and that'll smooth out all of those scratches. With the surface wet, I can see the sand scratches. So I'll just keep sanding until those disappear. It's really good to have a nice flexible sanding board for doing areas like this, because you want to get it super flat, but it's nice to have a contour. My other sanding block is just too rigid, but this has a nice flat surface at the same time. It's a little bit more flexible. Got a little thunder going on out here. It's starting to even rain. I've got the roof all finished now. I've got it all sanded and prepped and ready to just mask and paint. I want to take these doors off and finish prepping around the side of the cab here. Impressive storm. Before I take these doors off, I wanted to show you a little trick. I've got these doors perfectly aligned, and I'm going to leave these hinges on the cab, but I'm going to just take the doors off from the hinge. That way I don't have to worry about getting them exactly back. It'll be much easier. But there's a trick that I learned at the hot rod shop where you drill a hole in the hinge all the way through the door, and then you can just slide in an 1/8 inch drill bit into that hole when you set the door back in place. So you can see in this hinge there's a couple of factory holes that are in the plate, and when you're doing a real high-end show car, I love thunder and rain. When you're doing a high-end show car, typically you'll drill a hole in each hinge because you spend a lot of time just making all those gaps perfect. You want to make sure to get it back in that spot without a whole lot of work. Well, these doors adjust really easy in and out. They're real hard though to get adjusted height-wise, and I have all the body lines perfectly straight. So to help me be able to get that right back in place height-wise quickly, what I'll do is I'm going to use the factory hole that's already there, and I'm going to drill an 1/8 inch diameter hole right up against the top edge of that, so that when I'm ready to put the door back on, I put in a nut, slide it up where I can get that drill bit in as my pin to hold it, and then I can make my adjustments and tighten it down. Now it's all the way through. when I paint that jamb, it will paint that drill hole. And the inside of the door I can actually get to, and I can dab in a little bit of paint. I could even dab in a little bit of seam sealer and just seal it up and nobody would know it was ever there. But it's so well hidden, nobody's gonna know anyways. So just the one hole is all I need, just enough to get the height right, and then I can make the adjustments, and I'll do the same thing on the other hinge. So I spent the day sanding and cleaning all the metal surfaces of the cab, the roof, all of this side. It's ready for paint, except I need to put my seam sealer in here because I want to paint over the seam sealer. So I purchased some seam sealer from Eastwood's. I've never used this one before. I bought black. You can get it in all different colors. I've never done one with this heavy textured seam before. All of these seam sealing I've done in the past, you just smooth it over with a solvent and peel off the masking tape. But not only do I want to have the same shape, contour, and width, but I want the same texture that the manufacturer had put on. So hopefully you can see this in the video. This is the OEM look. And I've got the same width. These actually overlap. This one goes on first, and then this one overlaps it just a little bit. I had scraped some of it off when I welded all these together, so this is all going to be new, and then I'll have to extend this, and I'll try to match the overlap as much as I can. To start with, I like to press it into the actual seam. And once I've got it pressed up underneath that edge as much as I can, then I'll try to mimic the OEM look. And it's close, but not close enough. So what I'm going to attempt is to use my putty knife looks better. Got it on just a little bit too heavy. Now let's try it again. That looks pretty good. It's wicking up a little bit and spiking, so I'll probably have to just kind of knock that down as it starts to set up. So I'll experiment with that a little bit. I actually like that look a little bit better. I'm going to go back over it and smoothen it out. Alright, let it set up just a little bit. I don't want it to set up too much. Okay, don't let it set up. If you let it set up too much, it wicks really bad. You got to get it off while it's wet. Well, there's a lot of trial and error in playing with it, but I finally got it to where it looks pretty close to the factory original. Once I get the paint on it, it'll fill in and smooth out even more. But I'm really happy with it. I just need to take and finish this area right here. But I'll have to wait till that cures, and I'll finish that tomorrow. I used my little glue-on slide hammer to pull these two dents. And it goes back to that again. If it was white, I'd be happy with it. But with black, it just shows. And no matter how hard I tried, so since I'm repainting so much of this, I mean, this back panel had a lot of scratches in it. The roof, obvious. The other side. I was trying to avoid painting this area, but not only does it have dents here, but this edge is all gouged up from me getting the back window out. So I wanted to just kind of mask and paint that area. So I might as well just go ahead and fill these. And I will blend this with the black base coat, and then I'm going to just re-clear this whole area on the side of the truck. Just is what makes the most sense. And there's dents like this on the bed too. I'm probably gonna have to do the same thing with the bed because I'm just not happy with looking down the side of that beautiful shiny black and just seeing these light ripples. So I'm gonna mix up some filler and just put a little over those. I gouged this pretty good with 180 into the base of the holes. The spot glazing putty will be fine for these. I really like this dolphin glaze because it sets so quickly since it's a two-part. But it dries fast too, so you can't get away with doing large areas unless you're really fast. So while these are getting cured good and solid, I'm going to go ahead and sand all of this area with a 1000 grit sandpaper so that I can go back along these edges and buff it to a shine where it looks like nothing has ever been done. Sometimes it leaves a slight residue, a slight edge from the masking, but I'm going to roll the masking back so it'll give it a soft edge. And then I'll be able to buff that edge back up again. That was 220. Now I got 320. Okay, I'm confident that this is smooth as well as that I've got all the 220 sand scratch. And I will do the rest of this area with the 320. I'll finish and I'll sand this area, and then I will prime these in so that I can do the final sandpaper. Once it's primed, then I'll sand it with 600. Well, it looked like just a simple dent reared its ugly head with raised areas on both sides of that dent. So as I sanded this down smooth, what started out as a little dent right here has a high spot here and a high spot here. So I'm going to have to tap that one down and then refill it. Primer time. Thanks for checking out my channel. I'm here to learn, to teach, and hopefully to inspire. I really appreciate you subscribing. Leave me a comment. I love hearing from you. If you like what I'm doing, please give me a like. Thanks again for watching.